Starting from puberty, the female body prepares cyclically for a future and eventual pregnancy. The first menstruation is called menarche and marks an important stage in every girl's life. The length of the menstrual cycle varies from woman to woman, although in most cases it lasts 28 days. There are many factors that can then influence the menstrual cycle and can be of a physical, psychological, and emotional nature. Every woman experiences different symptoms during the menstrual cycle, and they range from abdominal pain to headaches, irritability, mood swings. The menstrual cycle makes pregnancy possible as it allows the walls of the uterus to mature a small egg cell, which, if it is then fertilized by a sperm, can give rise to another life. To find out in detail what happens during pregnancy, week by week and month by month, click here to see the 3 videos I made. Now imagine the menstrual cycle as a complex biological clock which is influenced by hormones, chemical messengers that travel throughout the body and cause reactions within the organism, which in turn produces a biological response. But what happens during the menstrual cycle? What are the various stages and what happens? Let's go and see it in detail. Let's start by saying that the menstrual cycle begins to count from the first day in which the menstrual flow appears until the day before the start of the next menstruation. Let's take a 28-day menstrual cycle as an example. For simplicity, let's divide it into its main phases: menses, follicular phase, ovulatory phase, and luteal phase. From the 1st to the 5th day, the menstrual phase. This phase represents the period of the menstrual cycle in which the woman is less fertile and are a sign of non-fertilization. The decrease in the production of estrogen and progesterone by the ovaries causes the exfoliation of the superficial layer of the endometrium, a mucous membrane that covers the internal cavity of the uterus. This mucosa then detaches and bleeding occurs. Average blood loss is about 35 ml. This phase of the menstrual cycle allows the uterus to shed the lining built up during the previous menstrual cycle. From the 6th to the 14th day, follicular phase. In this phase, the reconstruction of the endometrium takes place, and at the same time, the growth of follicles begins in the ovary. Vesicles that contain an immature oocyte, the egg cells. It increases the secretion of the follicle-stimulating hormone, FSH, produced by the pituitary, and has 2 functions. It determines the maturation of the follicles and stimulates the production of estrogen by the ovary. The follicles of the 2 ovaries then compete with each other. It will then be only one of these follicles, called the dominant follicle, which will mature and come to a conclusion. The other follicles, on the other hand, will undergo a regressive process at the various stages of their development. It is precisely the dominant follicle in the face of the fallen levels of FSH to release large quantities of estrogen, which will then cause the formation of a new layer of endometrium in the uterus flaked off by the previous menstruation. The dominant follicle grows faster and begins to withdraw follicle-stimulating hormone and estrogen from the other follicles. In the preovulatory phase, the levels of the follicle-stimulating hormone and the luteinizing hormone, LH, produced by the pituitary gland, rise. Consequently, the levels of progesterone, a hormone synthesized by the ovaries, will also slowly increase. 14th and 15th day, ovulatory phase. We have reached the middle of the cycle and marks the transition from the follicular to the luteal phase. At this stage, the endometrium reaches its maximum thickness. Thanks to the sudden increase of the luteinizing hormone, LH, which reaches its peak, the wall of the ovarian follicle is weakened. At this point, the follicle frees the oocyte, which has now reached maturity in the fallopian tubes, to be eventually fertilized. Estrogen levels drop, while progesterone levels continue to rise. From the 16th to the 28th day, luteal phase. Once the oocyte has been expelled, the follicle wall that contained it in the ovary collapses and forms a temporary endocrine gland, the so-called corpus luteum. It starts secreting progesterone and smaller amounts of estrogen and begins to drop the levels of LH and FSH. Progesterone is an indispensable hormone for the preparation of the endometrium, where the egg will nest in case of fertilization. Progesterone also has the function of raising the basal temperature and stimulating the production of glycoproteins, which will then serve as a source of nourishment for any embryo. In the event that fertilization occurs, the embryo produces human chorionic gonadotropin, HCG, which is able to prolong the life of the corpus luteum and therefore the continuation of pregnancy. If, on the other hand, the ovum is not fertilized, the regression of the corpus luteum begins, which transforms into an albicant body, small mass of fibrous tissue, whitish in color, observed in the ovary.